As promised, I'm going to look at the Jaguars roster and tell you where they could be weaknesses, where they could be vulnerable to being attacked. We'll do that today here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's correct. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. This is where we talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars every single day, and we hope that you tap in wherever you get your podcast to watch or listen. We will be there, and we're free to subscribe to. Make sure you check it out. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. That is right. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Once again, shout out to the everydayers. And if it's your first time, thank you for joining us. All right, here's what we got today. This is what we're going to do. Strengths and numbers. Why I believe depth in those numbers will be important. And one of the things that the Jaguars can use to help them be very, very successful, especially in the defensive secondary, as well as some stuff in the front seven. We'll talk about that. The possible weaknesses in 2025. Man, speaking of front seven, that's kind of where we're going to sit at. We're going to sit right there at the front seven, and then we're going to talk about the trenches on offense as well. All right, but first, a wide view of the 2025 roster. Now that the draft is done, unrestricted free agents or undrafted free agents have been signed. A bit of a macro view of this roster. I like what the Jags have done. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. They're not perfect at all. You just can't do everything in 1 year. But what I really, really do like about what they've done is they definitely maximized and tried to do a whole bunch more. And they were very, very targeted in what they attempted to do. They added 4 defensive backs to this roster. Mainly at the safety position, which is where we all figured they needed all of the help anyway, right? They did get Jordan Lewis to play corner. He's going to play corner and slot, I believe, to go along with the guys that they already have in the secondary. And they attacked the offensive line. I mean, they added 5 bodies. And, you know, it's not always the only way to add talent to the top of the roster. We have talked for a long time here about how you can fix the floor and you can inject right in the middle. You can inject a lot of competition, like right in the middle of your team, with guys that don't cost you a whole bunch of money, but they have starting experience and they can actually come in and push the team. Too many times in the past, what they've done is they've drafted these super developmental guys, like just last year, right? In the 4th round. They took offensive lineman Devon Foster out of Missouri. Devon Foster was 24 years old as a rookie. He's 25 now. So there's not a whole bunch of like upside there, right? But he's one of those players that you look at and go, well, maybe they could get some kind of contribution from him. They did out of Jarian Jones, and they continue to want to get something out of Jarian Jones. And of course, we know Brian Thomas Jr. was very, very good last year. As I'm sitting here looking at the draft guy, was very, very good last year. Mason Smith is one of those people that is going to be critical, and we'll mention him in segment 2 because the possible weaknesses of this team are the places where they did not add anything, where they hope that coaching as well as a better substitution pattern, if you will, is probably going to be the thing that they want to get accomplished. But so we'll mention Mason Smith in segment number 2. If you look at the rest of that draft, Jordan Jefferson, he's also going to be bunched up when we start talking about the ability to stop the run. Cam Little, good pick. Really, really good pick. I think they got that kicker for a long time. That kid can kick it from a mile away. We still need to see what they have in DeAndre Prince, a 5th-round pick from last year. You can never have too many DBs. I think Keelan Robinson, the running back out of Texas, is going to have a hard time making this team because they just signed 2 more running backs. So I think even though they'll probably keep 4, maybe there's something that could be done or will be done with one of their veterans. I think Keelan's going to have a hard time making the team. He's a 5th-round pick last year. Super fast, was probably brought in here. He was one of those players that was probably brought in here just specifically for the kickoff role. I don't know if you can keep a depth piece just because of that. And I think the new way of thinking is that ain't going to happen. Right now, defensive end Miles Cole from last year's draft is someone that the Jaguars would probably give a chance to be edge 4, or he's not going to be the third guy. That's going to be Emmanuel Ogbah. But did he show enough, or do they feel confident enough that as a 7th round pick, he can be the dude that can be the 4th defensive end on this team? It's very, very possible. So from last year's draft to this year's draft, you can see the differences. The difference is the Jaguars in the past looked like they were going for traits. It looked like they were just going for dudes, let's just get the talent and see what they have, as opposed to this season where everything was pointed and everything was there wasn't a situation like they brought in free agents like last year who they just felt just upgraded the talent level of the team. That's one approach, but the other approach is to bring in dudes that upgrade the talent, but you understand that there's a specific thing you want them to do, and it is the thing that they have done wherever they have been. Bill Polian once said, don't be signing people expecting them to do something you've never seen them do before. And that makes a lot of sense. So that gets us to Eric Armstead, who is going to be the man of the hour when we attempt to talk about possible weaknesses of this team here. The Jaguars didn't add anything on the interior of the defensive line. Nothing. And it was one of those things that people thought that they were really, really going to address. Mason Graham was never going to be their pick, although 90% of the mocks had them taking Mason Graham, because the old thing goes, you can never have too many defensive tackles. Well, you can if none of them play nose tackle, and it doesn't help you actually get better where you're supposed to be getting better. So let's discuss that. Let's talk about the possible weaknesses in 2025, and we're going to start with the defensive line. We'll talk about that more here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs is something else, man. Teams getting beat you didn't even think was going to get beat. It's in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a time to get in on the action better than right now for the NBA. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, same game parlays, fans have way more than ever, a lot more reasons and a lot more information to make them smart, and they can win big because of it. I'm telling you, you better put your money on Ant-Man. Anthony Edwards is the real deal. And everybody's looking forward to him getting to the finals and going up against SGA one-on-one. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, it's your man Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you tap in. Whether you watch or listen, we'll be there. We're free to subscribe to. We're taking a wide view of the Jags roster, and something I've been promising people that I would do is I would wait until the player procurement with the draft and free agency, and then even post-draft when they sign undrafted free agents. And the Jaguars have even gone out and signed Emmanuel Ogbah, who I mentioned earlier, to be the third edge rusher for this team. Something that was very, very needed. Most people, when they assess the Jaguars from 2024, they talk about the offensive line. They talk about the lack of weapons outside of wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. They talk about the need to make sure that Trevor Lawrence is taken care of in a whole bunch of ways that people feel like he's been failed so far in his NFL career. And the other thing that folks discussed a lot was the defensive line because of the hockey substitution patterns last year, guys not really being in the game when you expected them to be in the game in critical junctures, and their ability to really stop and control the run. The Jaguars were a soft team. They were soft on offense because they couldn't convert on short downs and in the goal line area enough. And they were soft in the form of that. Now they have some players who are not soft, But as a team, they were soft because they did not stop the run when they needed to. They couldn't generate enough pass rush when they needed to in critical situations. They missed a lot of tackles in the secondary. All of those things have to stop. Those things had to go. So what you saw an injection of guys on defense that really, really play like their feet are on fire and they love to tackle. You saw the priority in the draft with the drafting of Jack Kaiser, that you get linebackers that understand exactly what it is they're supposed to do. You've seen with Emmanuel Ogbah that they believe and trust in their edge rushers and Josh Hines-Allen as well as Trayvon Walker, but they knew they needed some depth. The thing that you haven't seen is them address interior defensive tackle. As we were leading up to the draft, I just kept feeling uneasy about the prospect of them getting Mason Graham. I was even uneasy about it before, and then I said, okay, well, look, if they're going to run some kind of scheme where these dudes are two-gapping and they're not going to use a nose guard, then I understand it. Okay. You can play Mason Graham and whoever next to him, whether it be Devon Hamilton or Mason Smith or Eric Armstead. I didn't know they had a big role for Eric Armstead. When I saw him go up to the draft and make that announcement as the NFL Man of the Year, I realized that these are people that are very familiar with Eric Armstead and probably did a cartwheel when he left San Francisco when they were with the Rams because he gave them that many problems. I think they think very highly of him. And I think they believe that him and Devon Hamilton side by side, along with Jordan Jefferson, who they got last year in the 4th round, along with Mason Smith, who was their 2nd round pick this year, I think they said, okay, you know what? We're on to something. We got some people in there that can help us because they didn't even address it later on in the draft. It's the one thing about the draft that I told people. I said, look, I don't know how much Mason is a fit, but if they don't take him, they can always touch defensive line up later on. Guys like Josh Farmer was still on the board in the 4th round. But we know the Jags traded their 2nd round pick, right? And moved up to take Travis Hunter. So now you cover wide receiver and corner, right? You've upgraded both of those units by adding him. He's going to play on both. But then at some point in the draft, I said, okay, we know they got to address safety. And they did that twice. They also plugged in Wyatt Milliam right there in the 3rd round, a dude that has a large body of work as a left tackle. He could play left tackle or left guard. It's going to be interesting to see how they use him. And I liked everything. And I looked up and I said, you know what? They didn't touch the defensive tackle. It was one of the key needs. In fact, there were people that were sitting there trying to convince me that they needed Mason Graham. But for some reason, they didn't take him, they went and got Travis in a very, very bold move, but they never addressed interior defensive line. They never touched it. That's an answer to a question. The answer to the question is this: how much do they like their interior defensive line? For them to not touch it at all in free agency, as well as in the draft, it says 2 things. One, there's a whole bunch of resources already used on those positions, and you can't do that. And that's what I kept trying to tell people. I'll tell you exactly what I told Tony Baselli. This is before the draft. He says, who you like? So I don't know if I like Mason Graham that much. I don't know if he's too much better than the kid from Ole Miss. All right. I said, what I did, Tony, was I looked at the defense and said, what veteran player on defense is like the perfect player for the Jaguars and what they want to do? They can get crazy. I said it would be Dexter Lawrence or Vita Vea. The closest thing you got to those 2 guys in this particular draft was Mason Graham's teammate, Charles Grant. Not Charles Grant, the Grant kid, the big kid that ended up going, where did he go? Somebody, Jeff, I'll tell you in just a second who picked him up. It's Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant went 13th to Miami. I said, that's what I think they need. I don't think he's as good as those 2, even though Vita Vea was picked 12th and The other kid was Dexter Lawrence was picked 17th. Grant actually got picked very, very high, even if you don't think he's that good. So my point is that's what I thought. And you know what Tony said? He said, that's fair. That's fair. But it shows you that the Jaguars weren't saying, okay, we're going to take this player, or if we don't get that guy, we can find one later. They didn't care. Jacksonville just did not address it. Or it could be a situation where it's like, hey, man, we can't fix everything at one time, but we can, this is one situation where they can look at the numbers and say, you know what? A lot of money on Devon Hamilton, a lot of money on Eric Armstead. We got Josh, who makes a lot of money. We're about to invest a lot of money in Trayvon Walker. We used the second round pick just a year ago, even though they didn't do it. But what if they like Mason Smith? So this is what I keep saying to people. Maybe that even just because Trent Baalke picked somebody doesn't mean that these new people have to automatically not like them. Because they were evaluating last year too when those guys got drafted. They probably like those choices. They probably can understand, and their coaches, they probably look at their coaches and say, can you work with that? And they say, yeah, I can work with a couple of 330-pound nose tackles, and I can work with a 6'7" high character player at 3 technique. And then, oh, by the way, a 6'6", 305 former 5-star recruit who played in the SEC, who's now 2 years removed from an injury. Hell yeah, we can work with that. Let's go for it. Let's get it. Right? And that's exactly what it appears they're going to do. Unless there's something out there, and maybe there's no serious upgrade out there, but it appears that the Jaguars are going to roll with the crew that they have now and believe that coaching can be the biggest difference. I do think, though, I don't necessarily think it's a weakness, but if there is one, this is the first one that I thought about. And I know there may be those that believe that I'm being a little presumptuous that the offensive line got fixed just because they added all of those bodies. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better. I think it's going to be better because I think I'm not one to forget that I also thought Phil Rauscher wasn't doing a very good job with coaching, right? With coaching his guys up. I heard Phil Rauscher was the dude that everybody thought Press Taylor was, by the way. That Phil Rauscher was the dude taking out Doug Peterson's trash when he wasn't home. And that Phil Rauscher was the dude that everybody thought that him and Press Taylor were so close that he would. The one he treated like his son was Phil Rauscher. Okay? So now I think that change is going to absolutely help the Jaguars' offensive line. I do believe this. And by the way, I was also told off the record that wait till you see what this offensive line coach does. He's tremendous. So he was assistant offensive line in Minnesota. Therefore, I do want to give him a little bit of a chance because I do believe the bodies that they threw, whether it's Fred Johnson or Chuma Edoga, those guys, who have played a lot, Wyatt Milliam. So I'm looking at our lads' depth chart here. Guy picked last year, Javon Foster's on the third team, along with Jonah Monheim, who I think has a legit chance to make the team on the offensive line. So the reason why the offensive line isn't as much of a concern to me is because of the influx of talent. Pat McCarry is going to be very good. I think Robert Hainsey makes them very, very good. What happens is you look at it and go, I like what they've done here. I like the work that they've done, the body of work, and how big those guys are, and the versatility that they're going to have. And then I really like them because of the scheme of Liam Cohen. And I think that's what I believe in more than anything else. So the biggest weakness, the biggest perceived weakness I have is on the defensive line. I'll go over that a little bit more at the top of segment number 3, and then tell you why I think strength in numbers really, really helps both of the trenches on offense and defense. We'll talk about that more here on Locked On Jaguars. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day, talking about perceived strengths and weaknesses of the Jaguars headed into 2025 season based on what the roster is right now. I think a strength of this team will be wide receivers. And their ability to turn lemons into lemonade and make more out of stuff than what's there. The ability to run after the catch and to play with speed, I believe, is going to put a lot of pressure on other defenses. And people don't know really what this offense is going to look like. I think the Jaguars have really weaponized themselves and really weaponized Trevor Lawrence to be able to have a lot of success. I think the biggest weakness is I hope the interior defensive linemen are as good as they believe they are, to the point where they didn't go out and really, really address any of that. In fact, the group looks very, very similar to the same one you saw on the field at the end of the year. Hopefully you'll see them on the field and you won't see them running on and off the field as much as they did. But right now on our lads, they have Mason Smith listed as the starter. I ain't got no problem with it, along with Devon Hamilton. The next duo inside is Jordan Jefferson, and of course, Eric Armstead. And then after that, Tyler Lacey and James Carpenter. Lacey is really one of those dudes. By the way, the edges that they have on the second team are Miles Cole and Emmanuel Ogbah, just like we thought. They have Yasir Abdullah listed as the third edge behind Ogbah and Josh Hines-Allen. So that's very interesting to see on here as well. Tyler Lacey is interesting because if they keep 10, I think he makes it. If they keep 9, that's a big question. Maybe he sticks it out in there because of his versatility, his ability to play 3 technique and big end. You just don't give up on big bodies like that. But that's the thing. I do believe that. I don't personally think it's a weakness, but I do think that if there is a weakness that you can identify, like if I name right now, what will the Jaguars be looking for next offseason, barring injuries, I think the first thing you can talk about is defensive tackle. And then probably offensive line. I wonder if I could get with FanDuel, and FanDuel can give me some odds on what the Jaguars will need next year. I remember it was me and John Shipley. We said after 2023, at the beginning of 2023, we did the same thing, and we both said the Jaguars are going to need a number 1 receiver in 2024, and that's exactly what they went out and got. And in fact, they went out and got a number 1 receiver, and then they thought they signed a number 2 receiver in Gabe Davis, who never caught on here, and he's gone after only 1 season and a big contract. So that's kind of what the same thing that I'm doing right now. I'm looking at this team and I say, if I had to take a wild guess and tell you right now, a year ahead of time, what the Jacksonville Jaguars will be needing in the 2026 NFL draft or free agency, I would say it is interior defensive tackle, nose tackle to be more specific, because I do think that they're going to see enough in Mason Smith to realize he's going to be a starter for them on their defensive line long term. I want him to turn the corner, though. I want him to turn the corner. And last year he flashed. He had some pressures, and we were like, well, that's what we like. We want to see a little bit more of that. And then obviously down in and down out, we want to see what they got going on in the run game. So it's going to be very, very interesting for me. I think the defensive backs are cool because they have so many guys and it makes them extremely versatile on defense with the way that they're going to run it, and we don't really know how they're going to run it. I've been hearing that Jordan Lewis will start outside and then move inside on obvious passing downs. If that's the case, then that means that Jarian Jones will be sort of like a part-time starter. Like when they're in nickel, Jarian Jones is going outside. And here on this Our Lads, they have him actually listed as the outside corner, opposite Tyson Campbell, and then you got Jordan Lewis as the nickel, Eric Murray and Darnell Savage are your safeties. I actually like that. I do think Caleb Ransall has a shot, though, to be more than just your nickel or dime safety. I think Caleb Ransall has a chance to push Darnell Savage down a little bit once he gets into the camp and understands the speed of the game a little bit. I would not be shocked if that happened. Then there will be a little bit of a battle between Antonio Johnson, Rayon Lane, and of course Dewey. Dewey's still hanging in there, and I think this staff likes Dewey. I would put Dewey probably on that second team with Ransall right now. as your group of four. And then depending on what Rayon Lane has, non-special teams, well, I think a lot of his value comes on special teams. So I definitely think he's going to be on this team. I have big questions about linebacker as well, but none about Foye Oluwakan, and really none about Ventrell Miller. I like the addition of Jack Kaiser. I thought the Jaguars would go out and actually add another linebacker. I thought they were going to go get somebody like McDuffie, the free agent from Green Bay, because he plays special teams and he knows Anthony Campanile extremely well, not only from the Packers, but from college at Boston College. Didn't happen. Green Bay retained him. So I felt like the Jaguars coaches will still go and get another guy they can groom in their own image and bring him along as the depth piece at linebacker. So mainly the takeaways is the strengths, I believe, is their speed at the skill positions on offense. Add Travis Hunter also to the defensive side when we were talking about the defensive backs. If he's going to start on that side of the ball, then I do think you see Jordan Lewis inside. Or maybe they put Travis Hunter, they line him up in the slot since he's not if he's not the full-time starter, they line him up in the slot with Jordan Lewis outside. Love the versatility. Love that your fourth corner is Jarian Jones, who showed enough as a rookie last year that y'all ought to anticipate that he's really, really going to make a lot of noise. You can't go wrong with it, man, when you look at the Jaguars roster and have hope for this new staff, especially if you think that this staff is going to be an upgrade from the last one. And I certainly believe that. All right, man, make sure you tap in with Locked On NFL Scouting. It'll help you keep up with the 90-man roster of your Jacksonville Jaguars and any other team that you want to find out about. The way you do that is you tap into Locked On NFL Scouting with the host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, and they'll make you the smartest fan in the National Football League because you'll know everybody's business. Locked On NFL Scouting can be found wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch or listen. Tune in tomorrow to Locked On Jaguars. We'll finish going through some more things as we head up to another weekend of minicamp, and I'll go over some of those things. Some of these other rookies that can make noise, the rookies and the second-year players. Put them two together, these last two drafts, and see exactly what it is the Jaguars have. Take a little bit of an inventory to see what they have in those last two, to give you an idea of what they might start looking forward to as we move on. We'll do all of that on Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you tune in. We'll see you next time.